Good morning, everyone. So welcome to the Diversity and Inclusion Breakfast at Ignite Australia 2015. It's great to see the room packed. This is a big topic for us, so we're very, very excited that you're all here to, hear about everyone's different stories and be engaged in the Q&A panel. So to kick us off today, we do have Deb Nola. She's the CEO of Switch Automation. And one thing I should note as well is the door does say that this is going to finish at 8:30, but we will make sure that you're out of here at 8:15, so don't stress, we will get you to your sessions on time. But yeah, please welcome Deb Nola, CEO of Switch Automation.
Thanks, I don't need that. Just have to put my timer on so I keep on time. So I'm really impressed that so many people are really into diversity and inclusion. Either that or this is the only free breakfast option. So my name's Deb Nola and I'm the CEO of Switch Automation, and I just wanted to tell you my story today. I've been in tech since I did my degree at James Cook University in computer science starting in 1985, 86, 87. Somewhere around there, and so my first job was in 1989. And I got into tech, and everything that I've done from the minute that I left school was accidental. But diversity starts way before the workplace. So I just want a show of hands. How many of you have children? Okay, so diversity starts with kids. I was a poor kid from New Zealand, and I grew up in a family where education was considered really important and anything was possible. And I grew up with that belief that anything was possible. So I wasn't a cute kid, I wasn't a good looking kid, I wasn't a sporty kid, I just grew up with parents that said, you go girl, anything is possible. So that's kind of the environment that I grew up in, and I also grew up in an environment, and because it's New Zealand was actually the first place that ever gave women the vote, so it is a very sort of pro-female thing. And most of the women that I've spoken to from New Zealand they all have the same thing, that I never thought that gender held you back. Like, we all grew up with this thing that it wasn't any big deal. And I also grew up in a family of very powerful women. It was a whole family full of powerful women. So I just wanted to convey that message to you as parents, that just creating that belief in your kids that anything is possible is probably the most valuable thing that you can do for your kids. It's more important than the education that you pay for. So I came into tech, and it was before tech was sexy. I don't know how many of you were in tech before 1990. Is there a raise of hands of how many of you were in tech before 1990? It wasn't very sexy. It was no more sexy than accounting or law or anything else. And then through the 90s, tech took off, and all of a sudden it became this like giant, fantastic thing. And our salaries went up 10 to 20% year on year, and all of a sudden we were in the coolest place in the room, which was interesting. I actually moved to Cairns in 1991 with my husband, who got a property job, and I just thought, I'm never going to work again. You know, Cairns is like hardly the tech hub of the world, and so I'm probably never going to get a job. In fact, I did. I got a job programming with a guy in Cairns who was servicing mining industry up in Indonesia. He was the biggest chauvinistic pig I've ever worked for in my life, and I was pregnant with my second child, and I left, and I just said, I don't need to work for somebody like that, so I left. One of the other guys at my work, he knocked on my door about 3 months after my second child was born, and he said, you know, I think he's a chauvinistic pig too, and I'm gay, so how about we go into business together? And I went, cool, let's do that. I got nothing better to do. So John and I started a business, and John and I are still in business today. So this is a relationship that has spanned 4 children and my marriage, and it's probably one of the most powerful relationships that I have in my life. And if anybody is lucky enough to ever have a co-founder relationship like John and I have, it's an extremely blessed thing. So anyway, we started this business. We grew from 2 people to 36 people. We were turning over $4 million a year. We were banking $1 million. We were literally just rolling around in cash and good fortune. And we built a tech team of 36 people, and apart from the 2 office girls and myself, they were all men, and they were all aged between 25 and 35. And I guess about at that point in time, I developed an unconscious bias. You know, people in tech are generally male, generally 25 to 35, they're not old, they come from a certain background, blah, blah, blah. So that's kind of my background. And then we moved to Sydney, and I'll cut this bit of the story out, but we ended up starting 2 or 3 other businesses, and the business that we have today is in the Internet of Things in buildings. So we develop software for smart and connected buildings. So what is diversity? This is a funny story, and I'll get to this in a minute, but basically what is diversity? If I advertised a job on my website, I need somebody who is interested, who has a strong technical background, they have these types of programming skills, they are interested in the Internet of Things, da-da-da-da-da. If I put that job up, I guarantee you I would have around about 100 applications, and I guarantee you 98 of them would be male, aged between 25 and 35, and I'd probably have a couple of women in there. And there'd be a lot of mixed race in there. We'd have a lot of people with Indian and Asian backgrounds. But generally speaking, diversity is not what you will get if you just put job applications up on your website. So what is diversity to everybody here in the room? Because diversity actually means a lot of different things. I mean, these days we tend to talk about gender diversity a lot, but diversity also means people of mixed race, people of mixed religion, people with disabilities, people with Aboriginal backgrounds, people that are older, and that's becoming more and more important to me these days. And this is also a little bit of a story about my company. So when we first started in 2005, we realised we had to attract tech talent, and we were in Sydney, and it was, a fairly boom time for tech. And everybody in tech in Sydney doesn't want to work for a startup. In San Francisco, it's completely the opposite. Everybody wants to work for a startup because a startup might be the next Facebook, and you'll have the options, you'll end up really, really rich, and you'll be the person buying the apartment with your stock options. In Sydney, however, most of the tech talent wants to work for Google or Microsoft or some of the other big people. So it's really hard for a startup in Sydney, and this has changed, but certainly from 2005 through to 2010, this was true. It was very hard for us to attract tech talent. So, and then the ones that we did were the people that came in at 3 o'clock in the afternoon and left at 6 because really they'd done their 2 hours and they had enough to live on now so that they could leave. So what we did was we went to Odesk and what was vWorker back then, but it's now been bought by Freelancer, and we started to advertise for tech talent anywhere in the world. And through a few hiccups of outsourcing, we found we found a really fantastic person for our particular application. This guy's a really great machine-to-machine kind of person in the Philippines. His name's Daryl. When he came on with us, he was $8 an hour, so very affordable. And he was so good, he left his job and ended up working for us full time. And what we did is we then started a company in the Philippines, and we built an entire team around him. So we now employ 13 people in the Philippines. And then we also found that there's a really hotbed of tech talent in the Eastern Europe area. So anywhere in Ukraine, Romania, Czechoslovakia, all in there. And what we realised is that we didn't just want programmers on their own all around the place. We wanted to create these teams. So we found a group in Ukraine, and we also started an office there. So now we hire 6 people out of the Ukraine. So without even really intending to, we became this really multicultural, diverse team. We've got 13 Filipinos, we've got 6 Ukrainians, and we've got a bunch of people in Sydney and now San Francisco. So this was our team, a general picture of our team about, this was last November actually. Every year we hold a developers event. Usually it's in Sydney, but it's getting increasingly more expensive to do that around Christmas time. So last year we decided we'd do that in Hong Kong. So this is a picture of our team. That's my co-founder, second from the left. You can spot the Filipinos versus the Ukrainians, but basically there's John and I and a whole bunch of Filipinos and Ukrainians. And that was the entire team around about a year ago. So you can see that they're mostly 25 to 35 and mostly men. About 3 years ago, I was asked to become part of Springboard Australia. So it was the inaugural class, 2013. And somebody rang me up and they said, we're starting this women's network group and we really want you to be part of that. Would you apply? And I went, no, why would I do that? I'm a woman in tech. I've been here for 20 years. I've worked in mining. what the heck would it be of any interest for me to put my hand up and say that gender is some sort of disadvantage and go into some women's thing, like, oh, poor me. And I went, no, I'm not doing that. That's a really ridiculous thing. And then they kind of talked me into it, so I went, all right, I'll apply. I'll just apply, I'll go, and I'll see what this is all about. So I applied, I got in, and then the more I got into this, and I've actually since joined 2 others. So Heads Over Heels is another group that's run by all of the executive women in Sydney, and what they do is they bring women-led businesses in and they use the network to make introductions. So it could be for raising capital or it could be for sales introductions. So there's Heads Over Heels, Springboard, and the other one eludes me, but it'll come to me. Anyway, I went from being totally against these women's network groups to totally the opposite. And the reason that I went from on a polar axis from one side to the other was that I realised it's just a network, for crying out loud. Nobody's giving you any kind of favours or anything here. It's just a network and you use the network. Men do this all the time. They use their old boy networks, their school networks, their college networks all the time. What's this whole big deal about? Holding that against yourself. And so I realised it was just the power of the network. And then the other thing I realised was, man, these women will do anything to help other women. It's unbelievable the things that they will do. They will introduce you to the CEO of XYZ company purely just because they know that person. They have no idea on your reputation. They'll just basically put themselves out on a limb. And I thought, wow, that's so generous and amazing. So I sort of took all of this on board along with my own history, and I realised that I had this really ridiculous unconscious bias. And I don't know if many of you know the story of Gail Kelly, but everyone talks about her as the person who, I'm probably not allowed to say this, but anyway, the person who pulled the ladder up after she reached her position. I thought, maybe I'm no better than that. Maybe that's what I've actually become as this person. Well, I got here, so you've got to get here on your own. You don't need any help to get here. So that's kind of my story up until about 18 months ago. Then what happened was about 18 months ago I turned 50, and the person on the left there, she's my niece. It's totally irrelevant that she's my niece, except that that's why she was at my 50th birthday party. What happened was every time I turned around, I was organising this big event, I had people coming in, blah, 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 and every time I turned around, she'd done something off my list. She'd gone to Chinatown and bought the ducks. She'd brought the ducks home, she'd boned the ducks. Halfway through my dinner party, I realised she'd actually cooked my dessert. And I went, wow, I need somebody like that in my life. I was literally doing 15,000 jobs in my company. I was doing marketing, I was doing sales, I was doing programming, I was doing project management. And I went, okay, Christy, how about I give you a job? Actually, it's not really a job. How about I give you an internship? I'll pay you $70 a day as a living allowance, and you get to come with me wherever I am, and you get to sleep wherever I'm sleeping. So sometimes it'll be in my hotel room, and sometimes you'll get your own room, and sometimes it'll be on the couch. And you just get to do whatever I'm doing, and you just literally bolt yourself at your hip, and you do whatever you can to help me out. But just because you're my niece, don't think that you've got any privileges. I won't hesitate to sack you if I have to. And she said, okay, that sounds like a deal. That's a really good deal. So she took me on, and she is now the global operations manager for our entire business. So she runs all of our operations across all 4 businesses. So she runs all of our finance, all of our HR. She is an absolute powerhouse of a girl. So that was kind of an accidental introduction into giving somebody just the first lucky break. And then the second girl there, her name's Kate Lade. She's actually the daughter of a friend of mine from Cairns. I knew her when she was about 5. I hadn't seen her since she was 5. She'd since done a double maths biotech degree at Queensland University, UTS, no, not UTS, QTS. And she was working in the Wallace Bishop Jeweller in Queen Street Mall. She was looking for her first lucky break. And Belinda was down having dinner with me in Sydney, and she said, hey, Deb, how about, have you got any ideas for Kate? And I went, oh, not really. And then 6 months later, I went, you know what? I need a data scientist, and I can't afford a data scientist. So I rang up Kate, and I gave her the same offer that I gave Christy. I said, how about you come along? I'll pay you $70 a day. You can come to San Francisco. You're more than welcome to apply for jobs over there. Data science is the hottest career going in San Francisco right now. There's no guarantee of a job. If it doesn't work out, then, it won't work out, but what the heck. She's now in our Sydney office, and John regards her as the second most important person in our team after Daryl. She's an absolute gun. Then the third one that I've just taken on is Law, who put the deck together, and she is doing a lot of UI, UX and marketing and design, and I need to talk faster, so I'm just going to skip through here. So this year I said, okay, these women have been amazing for my business. They have brought in skills that I wouldn't necessarily have advertised for. I just needed those skills. And so this year what I did was, instead of advertising for a job that I needed on the website and attracting 98 men and 2 women, what I did was I said, these are the skills that I need, and I'm going to go out and actively look for females that could fill those roles. So I actually went on a bit of a pro-female bender, I guess, gender bender. And I've hired 9 women this year. So our team has gone, we're growing anyway, but instead of it just growing the way it might have done with 98% men and 2% women, I actually actively set out to create an environment where we could attract female talent. So this is our team now. It's a very diverse looking team. We've got a very good mix of men, women, and we already had that whole cultural diversity. So what I wanted to talk to you a little bit about was what you should do about hiring strategies in your own team, but also what these people brought to my team. And I was thinking about this last night, and I was thinking, what are the things that they really brought? And the things that those 3 interns were so hungry for that first lucky break, that they were so grateful, that they work so hard. They actually work harder than anybody else in the team. And what that does is it actually creates this environment where everybody thinks, bloody hell, I better, step it up a notch. So they've actually created this culture where everybody's working really, really hard. But they also brought an enormous amount of humour into the team. Like, a lot of the women that I've hired are really funny, and they are really light-hearted, and they love jokes, and they love to cook, and they bring in cakes and all that kind of thing. And it's actually made our office environment just a really much lovelier place to be. It's not so intense as it was, because I'm a fairly intense person, and John's an incredibly intense person. And so what these people have done is they've brought in this really strong work ethic, along with this amazing ability to also have fun. And it's been a fantastic experience, and I better wrap it up and invite Katie up. But I just wanted to share that with you this morning, because I know us in tech, it's hard to break those patterns sometimes. Thanks.
Hi everyone, my name's Katie McIntosh, and firstly Deb, thank you very much. Thank you for coming out so early this morning. It's nice to see such a full room. We were sitting here earlier going, I wonder if anyone's going to come. So thank you. Thank you for supporting something so important. I would like to introduce our panellists this morning. We have Deb Noller, who you've already met. We have Ingrid Jenkins, who's the Australian HR Director and has just started. And we have Anushka Wajendra, who's the business manager for our general manager, Pip Marlowe. And I'd like to invite them up. Now, we've already heard from Deb with regards what diversity and inclusion means for her and building a culture within her organisation. So I'd like to actually ask Ingrid and Anushka to share their thoughts on what diversity and inclusion means for them.
Sure. Morning, everyone. Great to see so many people here, even people standing at the back. There's some breakfast there. You can take our chairs now. For me, diversity at the core is really about diversity of thinking, diversity of thought, and that's why it's a business issue in how do we generate that. And I challenge each of you to think, when you have a good idea, the power of making that a great idea is when you get people with different perspectives coming in and building that. And so diversity to me is, how do you get that perspective and how do you really generate the good to the great? And obviously from a business and social perspective, we think about, well, what does diversity and what is difference? And that's when we say, how do we get better gender representation? How do we get better nationality, age, whatever that might be? But to me, at the core, it really is about how we build that diversity of thinking. And then I think the inclusion bit is then, how do you infuse that? And that's the language we use at Microsoft. How do we actually infuse that into what we do? so that diversity is no longer a novelty, it's just how we do business around here, and that we actually encourage and celebrate diversity rather than it being a standalone or an exception. And that, I think, is the real challenge that we face, is how do you really integrate it into the operating rhythm of the business.
Excellent, thank you. Noosh?
Yeah, so I'll come at this probably building on what Ingrid just said, a little bit from a personal angle. I moved to Australia when I was about 4 years old. We came here as immigrants from Sri Lanka. We grew up in some flats in Melbourne, and every evening me and my mum, we'd pore over the newspaper and we'd look at people who were successful, all these people that didn't have any family money, and they went into their garages and built these great businesses and would come out and have fun and tell stories about how they were combining work and life and, you know, and building greatness. And I remember growing up really genuinely thinking anything was possible. And then I studied law, as all good Sri Lankan people do, and then left it, as no good Sri Lankan person does, to go and work for a booze company, selling. And I did a cognitive test. It was Diageo at the time. I did a cognitive test. They got you to do personality profiles. And in the interview, my manager to be said at the time, you know, Noosh, you seem to have done pretty well here, 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 and here, but you're not very competitive. And that's a real problem in a highly driven sales culture. And I said, oh, geez, you know, it seems like a great place to work, a top employer, free alcohol, I think I'd get a lot more friends. So this would be a real shame. And said, I'm going to take a risk and take a bet on you. So he did. And I was the only female, only under 25 at the time in my team. It was a great team. And I used to go home every evening and I read Zig Ziglar's The Art of Closing the Sale, trying to figure out how it is I could get this, you know, sales gene imbued in me. But 6 months later, you know, I was okay at my job. I wasn't great. 6 months later, they realised that they wanted to bring new products to market, and it required a different skill set. It required a connector and a collaborator, and probably more of a business development skill set than a traditional sales sort of hunter mentality. And they said, who in our organisation can do that? And they looked at their names and they thought, oh, there's this outlier over here who didn't fit our personality profile. Maybe we'll get her to do that. And I did. I did it for 2.5 years and I loved it. And I think about that a lot when I hire, because sometimes you hire for what was, not necessarily looking at what is around the corner and what could be. And I think in our business and in our industry in particular, innovation is so core. The dynamics are changing all the time. The reason why I think diversity is so important is because our customers, our markets, they're changing all the time. So that's what diversity is for me. It's the mix. Inclusion is making the mix work. And I think that's very much around workplaces and culture and stuff. And, you know, I work for a very inclusive manager. She's put up with a lot of things from me, including wearing Havaianas to work on customer days, bringing my dog to work. It's a very inclusive workplace, but I know that I can be me and bring the best of me every day to work, and as a consequence, she gets a lot more out of me. So, yeah.
That's a great story, thank you. Does anyone in the audience have any questions? I've got a nice little list. I'm quite happy to keep asking, but I'd really love to hear from everybody out there. If we've got some microphones floating around. No, not yet, not yet. All right, so I might ask my first question to you, Ingrid. What is it about the culture of Microsoft where we're trying to create a more diverse and inclusive environment? Like, what is it that we're doing?
So I just want to call out to everyone, I've been with Microsoft for 4 weeks, and so good
Cracked it
question
already.
for me. So this is a good test for how well I've listened and I've felt the culture. And I've had an amazing 4 weeks, I will say as well, particularly there's just so much happening at the moment. We had the retail store last week in Sydney, and so anyway, enough about that. So certainly Microsoft is very much moving towards this growth mindset, and which is around learning and being a continual learner, never getting complacent about we've solved it now, that's it. It's that continual journey of how can I learn from others, and it just so nicely plays into diversity. In that moment, it's really even challenged my thinking, and I've really taken on board to say when you're in a situation and when you're talking to people about something, how probably my natural response is sort of to half listen but just want to give my point of view about something, or almost, refute or argue and debate, where I'm really consciously thinking, I really want to step into this person's shoes, I really want to see their perspective, which is the learning bit, and then really reflect before I respond. And I think for me, that's how we infuse diversity and inclusion, is that not always jumping to that assumption of I have a right, the person I'm talking to may be wrong, but really how do I learn from this person, and how do I respect the diversity they're bringing into this conversation and actually celebrate that rather than try to muffle it. So I think the cultural journey around that growth mindset is absolutely compatible with building a more diverse and inclusive culture.
Yeah, it's very true. Any questions yet? Yes. Just one sec, we'll just get a microphone over to you. If that's all right, please.
How do we get our daughters into IT?
That's a good question. Who wants to tackle? I think everyone's probably got an opinion on that. Would you
Do
like
you
to
want to
start,
start?
Ingrid, or it's Deb?
Yeah, so I mean, it's the whole thing about girls is they have to realise that they can do it, and girls can do maths, girls can do physics, girls can do chemistry. So why can't they also do IT? I don't know why women don't go into IT. There was only 2 women in my course, and Esther was saying she was the only one that went through hers. So I'm not sure how we attract them there, because it's a fascinating career and it's a fantastic career. But I would say it starts with you as parents, that you want to introduce your girls to the fact that technical careers are possible, they're interesting, they're well paid, and they're exciting, and they've got great opportunities, and that is possible.
I don't think the issue is the technical side of it. Getting my daughter interested in science and maths was never a problem. Getting her interested in IT was a problem. So she enjoys engineering and she enjoys biochemistry, but I just can't seem to get her interested in IT. Now that may be just specifically her, but it seems to be an issue where most of the younger ladies that I know through friends and their daughters, those that are getting into science and everything else, don't want to get into IT.
Tell her to come and have a coffee with me.
We did talk about this actually last night, and it's a really great question, and I've worked in IT&T now for 20 plus years, and every IT&T company has gone, what is it, what is the attraction? And I don't know whether we've ever done a deep enough diagnostic to really explore what is it, what is the piece that's blocking young women from going into the IT. And I think with the best of intent, we've made a lot of assumptions, and perhaps tried to do that through things like, I don't know, more flexible work practices or whatever it might be, but I don't know if we really know, and I think it's worth understanding and doing a deeper diagnostic to really then understand so we can solve for it.
Hello.
Hi, Steph.
I got a couple of things. I'm a male. I like females. So I'm kind of all for more women being in IT. Interesting enough, I'm on a 3 developer team, and I'm an Aussie, Australian, male, and my colleagues are a Russian. I'm the minority. There's 2 women in my team. So, which is really strange. I'm sitting there going, how did that happen? And I don't think it was an intentional thing. It's just one's from Russia, one's from Colombia, so there's a bit of diversity there as well. I guess sometimes I say, why is everyone so passionate about having women working on IT? Maybe they don't want to. And men and women are different. Men seem to be problem solvers. You tell them your problem at the end of the day, and they want to fix the problem. women, you tell them the problem, they just want you to empathise. They're not interested in fixing the problem. If you try and fix the problem, then you're in trouble. So, so
There's
that's
unconscious bias for you, right there.
so when my wife's telling me her problems at the end of the day, I'm going, well, she must want me to fix the problem, and she doesn't. So maybe that's just not the way, we're not wired the same way. And problem solving seems to be a big part of IT.
I live in a house with 5 men. I have 4 sons and my husband. If the internet goes out, they will all call me. Every single one of them will ring me. And these boys are aged from 18 to 25, so they're not exactly, 8-year-olds. They will ring me to fix the internet. Have
It's
you tried rebooting the router?
Just my observation. So.
Yeah. I know it's fair, everybody's different, and I think what Deb's saying is that unconscious assumptions, sometimes it's worthwhile questioning them as you go forward. Michelle?
Hey, I'm a Microsoftie, so I had an interesting thing happen to me recently that I think kind of speaks to that question. We in Microsoft recently sent out a program on unconscious bias, and everyone in the company needs to watch the video. And it's a really good video because unconscious bias is so subtle that you don't realise that it's all around you every day, in the TV that you watch, in the words that you say, in the things that you think. And after that video went out, one of the very, very high up people in Microsoft Australia called me, and I'm such a huge fan of his that I was a bit starstruck because, he's super famous. And he called me and said he'd watched that unconscious bias video, and he'd watched my TED Talk, because I have a TED Talk on Where Have All the Girls Gone. And he said that he was so appalled that he had been doing it himself. He said that when he was at home, working from home, and he's got 2 kids, a boy and a girl, when the girl would ask him what he's doing, he would say, Daddy's working, leave me alone, come back to me later. When the boy would ask him, he would explain a little bit of what he was doing. And he had started doing coding projects with his boy, and he'd never asked the girl because he assumed she would not be interested in it. And he went home from work that night and asked her if she wanted to join them, and she said yes. And they've been doing them together ever since, and he's really been enjoying it. And he was so shocked at himself because he had never seen himself as someone that would exclude his daughter or any woman from anything. And I would have said, he's a totally cool guy because I'm such a huge fan. But yeah, it's all around us, and the messaging, it's everywhere, and you don't even realise it. And women do it as well to each other and to little girls, oh, how cute are you? Whereas to little boys, oh, what a smart little boy you are. It's just everywhere.
Thank you, Michelle. Question over here.
I've come from a couple of different industries. One I've been in has been the fitness industry, particularly for group exercise, which has really been dominated by females, and I've built teams there. And I've always kind of struggled with the concept of what you actually need to get the right person to do the role. The skill bit's easy. The attributes that the person has that I think we need for the team is quite easy, because in my head I've got a picture of what I'm looking for. But how do you recruit for the attributes you don't know that you need yet?
Great question.
Yeah, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that. I mean, it is a really good question, and it's a bit of a balance. So, and the way I've sort of traditionally looked at it is in the context of a team. And how do I introduce, and the problem that we're trying to solve. So, normally if you're trying to, if you're trying to solve a problem that is unusual or a little different, I will take some bigger bets and perhaps go for people that might push the boundaries. If I have 5 people thinking the same way as me, I know I'm going to have a problem going forward. So I do look a lot at diversity of teams rather than perhaps, I don't want 5 females with my background talk in the same way I talk either. So, yeah, I don't know if you have anything to build on that.
No, it's a good question, and it's a challenging one too, because it is, and particularly in technology, what is the future and what do I need? But I think that too is about looking at your vision and what am I trying to drive and what are the changes I want to inspire, and that's sometimes hard to articulate. But then if I go back to the Microsoft and they talk about the fact that a behavioural side of what we're trying to do is that continual learning and that evolution of how we just continue to grow and we never stay still. And it may not be the same in the fitness industry, but it's like, how do I look for that then in candidates? What are the type of questions that I'd ask that I'd get some assurances around how they've learnt and how they engage and how they do step into the shoes of others and so forth, because culturally and behaviourally that's where we want to go. But it is challenging, but I think it comes back to what's your vision and what sort of culture or behaviours do you need to get to that vision, and how do you then test for that with your team and with new hires?
It's very different now. Now I'm on a cattle station and there aren't many women there at all, so it's a completely different team mix. And without having an experience of working in lots and lots of different industries, I guess I do struggle looking at how do you know the perfect composition for a team for a given situation. I think, yeah, start from the problem first is probably a good thing.
Learning along the way.
I actually come at it totally differently to that. I guess I've got the luxury of building a small business, so I'm lacking so many skills and roles, it's not funny. So what I look for is, I don't read the resumes, I just go out and have coffee or lunch with somebody. I look for somebody who I really like. Like, I'm going to spend 10, 12 hours a day with this person. Do I really like this person? Yeah, am I prepared to, spend that kind of time with these people? So you have to really like them. They have to be smart. Well, you can usually tell if people are smart just by talking to them. The kinds of conversations that they have, you can tell whether people are smart. So smart and passionate. But then, but they also have to really believe in what you're doing. Like, if they're not excited about what you're doing, if they're not excited about Microsoft, you don't want them on the team. It's just going to be toxic. You want people that just so desperately want to be part of that. And then you can find a role for them. If you're hiring for one specific thing and then you realise that they're better off somewhere else, it doesn't matter. If you've got those three qualities, then that person can come in. And if somebody passes my test, I don't actually make the final decision. I let the team decide. So I will vet somebody and I'll say, I want to hire this person, but the team actually decides, yeah, that person fits. And so that way we're keeping the culture that we want to keep.
Thank you. Any other questions? Over here on the back.
The comment earlier about the team of 3 programmers, which included one woman from Russia and one woman from Colombia, I think, that reminded me, I worked for 8 years in IT in Mozambique, Southeast Africa. And when we recruited, say, looking for recent graduates, the resumes would come in from, I would say it was maybe 40% female and 60% male. Which has me wondering if the gender bias in IT is, if not an Australian problem, maybe an English-speaking world problem. Do we have any data on cultures where there's a more even divide between the sexes in IT?
I'm sure there is. I'm not aware of it. And I suppose it comes back to my comment earlier about that diagnostic. So if we are seeing differences in different nationalities, different countries, it's understanding what those differences. And I have no doubt that our cultural, in terms of the Australian culture, absolutely plays into a reflection of what plays out in the workplace. I mean, it's all infused. But it's a good question, and I think again that comes back to that diagnostic and how we really and truly understand what is it that's we're not getting the representative numbers that we'd like to in IT&T in Australia.
Yeah, and I'll just probably add to that. I certainly don't know the tech stats, the IT&T stats of some of the emerging economies, but we know the Nordic countries, for instance, certainly bat above their weight on this in all forms, including tech. And a big part of it is they've got a lot of macroeconomic factors that they've been investing in for 50, 60 years around equal opportunity for both sexes. So it's also about, you know, your partner feeling comfortable around his choices and then your choices as well. So it's actually, so they've put a lot of investment on both sides, I think, and so for kids growing up, certainly a lot of investment in schooling as well, to tackle some of that unconscious bias, I guess, that Michelle was referring to as well. Yeah, so it is a long-term, it's a long-term problem. Yeah.
Oh,
Hi.
sorry, didn't say. Thank you.
Hi. I have a I'm really in for like having more women in the work environment and stuff like that. My wife, last year we came from Auckland to Sydney as she was doing her course at AGSM to do her MBA and stuff. And she started this club, a woman in leadership. One of the problem is actually you have women in wherever in IT or wherever. The second problem is actually the post-maternity thing. How like it's sad and it's very struggling that business kind of let go or don't give the equal opportunity to women based on like, okay, you know, after 6 months or something, they can't focus that much and stuff like that, and it's kind of like that. Like, is there a plan to change all of this politically, or somewhere we can change the culture overall in this respect?
It's a very big question.
It's a very big question.
Was this around maternity leave?
I think it is. The question was coming back from maternity leave, right? So
Yeah.
the onboarding back, the
Yeah.
on-ramp back from
Yeah.
maternity leave.
And you're talking about the unconscious bias that
Yeah,
now you're a
exactly.
mother,
Like,
you're not going to be
I-
able to concentrate.
I
or-
personally have spoken to some women, and they're really good. And of course, now they need to focus both ways to their profession as well as personal life, and they can't. Of course, because of that, they can't work as hard. And so like I don't know how you can change that in businesses overall.
Yeah, I mean, do you all have anything to add to that?
Yeah, look, it's a big one, isn't it? And I think there's a lot of assumptions made as well. And to Anushka's point too, when you look at countries and culturally have invested far more heavily at a macro level around what they do about equality, I expect that some of the issues you're talking about are far less. So I think even the assumption that the mother, I'm full-time, my husband actually is a primary carer of our children. So even that assumption that you're the mother, so therefore you are naturally the person that can't spend as much time at work because you're the mum, this comes again to this unconscious bias and these assumptions around, I think we've all got to challenge each other, whether we do when women go on maternity leave, going, how do we make assumptions for them? Do we assume that because they've been on maternity leave, they're a mother, that they no longer have the same level of passion? And it really is that unconscious bias. And I think also, to your point, working hard, I think we also as organisations and individuals need to challenge, what do we actually value? Is it working hard, or is it actually we value people in terms of their innovation or their impact, and rather than someone physically being in an office from 10 hours a day? So I really think that question is around that unconscious bias and the assumptions we make around women when they go and come back from maternity leave.
Yeah, look, and I think progressive companies see this as a competitive differentiator. So one thing we're aware of is that we are losing great talent to small businesses and for them to go off and start their own things to get the flexibility of lifestyle that they want. And that is a massive talent drain for corporations going forward. So I know we think about that problem deeply a lot in terms of how do we retain and allow flexibility in terms of workplace practices to allow that. So, and you'll see a lot more conversation around that happening anyway. You know, I know we had a finance lead that was traditionally a role that you know, would be done full time, and we had 2 part-time people job sharing, and they did a fantastic job, and it created an amazing partnership out of it. So it's about trying different things as well. Yeah.
So this is a hot topic. So I have 4 children, and I worked through all of my pregnancies and post-pregnancies. I was very fortunate. I had a partner who just totally believed that I had the right to work, and so he, at one point, we owned a business that was 7 days a week, and I was offered a contract in Indonesia where the money was just too good to turn down, and so he ran the 7-day-a-week business and looked after the 4 kids. I couldn't have done that. I mean, it was just an insane thing to have done. But I mean, that's the kind of guy that I married, and he was always, he was in property, so he actually earned a lot more than me. So it would have been the easy thing to do is to say, oh, I earn more than you, so you be the primary carer. But he never took that view. In terms of the maternity leave thing, this is where I get actually hot under the collar. As a small business person, I know that if I'm sitting there looking at a 29-year-old just married female and a 29-year-old just married male, and which one of those is going to go off and have maternity leave, and do I have to pay for that? You know, I'm probably going to make a decision that is actually negative for the female that's sitting on the other side of the desk. I don't think that that is a great outcome for females in careers. I think it's a really bad outcome. I don't think there should be paid maternity leave at all. What I think there should be is hugely tax deductible childcare to encourage women to come back into the workforce. I mean, if you hire a nanny, if you hire anybody, it will almost certainly be a tax deductible expense. But if you hire a nanny, it's not a tax deductible expense. So all of the nannies out there are paid out of after-tax income of the lowest earner in the family. So, you know, that they are paid the worst money in the world, the childcare workers, because they have to get what's left after everybody else has paid their taxes, and then they have to pay tax out of that. So they're typically paid the worst out of everybody in the entire workforce. And I just think, and it's forcing so much of our economy into a cash. And so this is a really big topic, and I could probably go on about this one for hours, and I won't. But basically, we have to encourage women to think about careers as vitally important, and that they are just as important as their male counterparts' careers, and they need to get back into the workforce, because the longer that you're out, the harder it is. And I can talk to this actually with a lot of experience, because my husband took 3 years out and was the stay-at-home dad. And one day I came home, and he spent 20 minutes talking about how he'd cleaned the whole house, and then the kids came home and they just dirtied it all again. And I just went, this is the most boring conversation I've ever had in my life. And we're never having this conversation again, and tomorrow you're going to start looking for work. And he went back to work. Now he's on a more than $200,000 income, so he's well paid, and you know, but he was terrified about going back into the workforce. This is not a female thing. This is anybody who's out of the workforce for 2 or 3 years will be terrified about going back in. And it's got nothing to do with whether you're male or female. It's just that a lot of women do make that decision. I didn't. My husband did. So these are big decisions, but basically we have to encourage all people to think of their careers as big, important things. They're as important as your education, and you need to plan for that. But the government needs to come to the party and give people childcare options that support that. And it's not about a 1-year maternity leave. That's rubbish. If you have 4 children, you're literally going to have, every child will be 5 years of childcare. So it's got nothing to, the maternity leave is nothing. Everybody can afford to have 6 or 7 or 8 months off on maternity leave. It's the other 4 years where you're trying to get back into the workforce that are really challenging. Sorry. That's rant. Rant attack.
We have time for one more question, and because I'm just conscious of making sure you all get to the sessions on time. Seriously hot topic.
Tanisha.
We could all talk. Yes.
Hi guys, I have a question.
Tanisha, sorry, I thought there was a gentleman over here.
So I work in a consulting team, so very sort of IT centric, and my team is largely male. And my manager came to me with a question. He said, you know, we're hiring some new consultants into our team, but one of the biggest problems is actually attracting female talent. And the issue that he proposed to me is around writing job descriptions, because when you read a job description and you're a male, they generally look at it and they say, okay, half the things I've done and I'm going to try do the other half. Whereas a female generally looks at it and says, okay, I can do half the things, the other half the things I'm not too sure, so I'm not going to apply. How do we sort of tackle that or, you know, overcome that issue?
Example.
Yeah, Noosh was just saying, I had a good example. A few years ago, I went, you'll be aware that in Australia, I'm not sure how many, but there's a number of male CEOs that are champions in terms of trying to advance gender equality. And I think it was the CEO of NAB Bank, or one of the big banks, and he talked about, certainly internally, I think that's a hard one to answer for the external, and I think maybe you need to look a little bit about the behavioural attributes, which, you know, the how we get things done, and how much emphasis you put on those. But certainly internally, he was telling a story that he had 2 internal candidates in the bank to join his leadership team, and one was female, one was male. And he said he knew through working with these individuals that the female was the better candidate, but when it came to the interview, the male told him all the things and why he was so great for the job, and the female expressed the concern she had about why she couldn't do the job. So some of that too is how, when you sponsor females, of how they do position themselves when they have opportunities to promote themselves, and I think there's a lot we can do to support that kind of context. But I think the other, from internal, is actually when you're promoting internally, the considerations and how you look at track records and don't rely exclusively on just an interview process for those reasons. But certainly in other organisations, there's a high investment around how to prepare females for interviews and how to coach them through presenting their best to themselves. But yeah, it's just certainly that. I took away a lot of learning from that conversation.
It's a really interesting one. I'm going to wrap it up here so that everyone can get to the sessions on time. Obviously, diversity and inclusion makes good business sense. So, you know, I think what we would love to ask of you today and your time here is just challenge yourself around any unconscious bias you've got. You know, challenge the assumptions that you make. Ask the people that you're working with. You know, just test your assumptions as you move forward. I have a draw. Thank you, Ingrid. Thank you, Anushka. Thank you, Deb. Thank you, Esther. Who's got their raffle ticket out to win this great headphone? E51, purple. Purple E51? Yeah. There we go. Yay, well done. Right, thank you all for coming and enjoy Ignite. There you go. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yes. Awesome. Thanks.